Melanie, did you get your test turned in? Did you guys turn it in? Yeah. And okay. All right, so that's going. Okay, so we started talking about the goods market. Our final frontier for our four-market model. So we spent the early chapters, you remember when we defined real GDP and the price level? Those are learning how to measure the variables that we care about. And what are those three goals? I haven't written those on the board for a while, but every society, every economy, we hope that policymakers have three goals in mind. What are those three goals? You can flip back in your notes, three goals. As they're thinking about policies and the Trump administration, and Congress, and possibly even Janet Yellen with the monetary policy. Yeah.
Low unemployment.
Low unemployment, good. So we got low unemployment. Probably the natural rate is what we'd like to be at, not zero as we learned, since we always expect there to be frictional and structural unemployment. So the natural rate of unemployment is a healthy level that we'd expect a healthy economy to be at. So low unemployment, what else? Higher real GDP, so economic growth, right? So increasing real GDP, economic growth, higher incomes. So we looked at the Trump administration's goal of having the economy grow at 4% rather than where we've been at 2 to 3. What was the last one? Low stable inflation, good. So low stable inflation. We don't want to be like Zimbabwe, where we've got 1,000% inflation going per hour almost at different points. So hopefully we have some stable monetary policy. We learned at the importance of like the independence of the Federal Reserve, that Janet can give the bird to Obama if she needs to. Doesn't have to take orders from him at all. And so having an independent central bank helps to keep the currency stable, because Uncle Milty taught us that the quantity theory of money could come out if we start running the printing press. Those countries tend to experience inflation, and this starts to become maybe high and unstable. All right, so those are our three primary objectives. And we're starting to model that last time with real GDP on the horizontal axis and the price level on the vertical. So remember, this really touches on all three of these objectives, and that's why that's important. So the inflation rate is the percentage change in the price level. Real GDP we're measuring on the horizontal axis. And so if we think about it as economic growth, it is the percentage change in real GDP. And unemployment, we learned, is what? Positively or negatively related to real GDP? Unemployment, positively related or negatively related to GDP, real GDP? So real GDP is going up, unemployment's going down. Negative or positive relationship? Negative relationship. Same thing when the economy starts to go in the crapper, real GDP starts to fall, unemployment starts to climb. So real GDP in that sense helps give us an idea of what's going on with unemployment as well. So we derived the long-run aggregate supply last time. Long-run aggregate supply. The idea was that the economy, in terms of real GDP, is independent of prices over the long haul. So this was close to the idea of the production possibilities frontier. being on the edge of the frontier. This kind of shows the potential for the economy in the long run. Long run, our potential is based off of our basic resources of land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and technology. And so we touched on our economic growth chapter how important education might be so that we have a skilled labor force. And hopefully that means that this long run aggregate supply curve will be chugging along to the right over time. If this thing's 100 and we hit 4% economic growth, then next year it should be at 104, right? So this thing hopefully is going to continue to be heading to the right if we have that economic growth that we're hoping for, and that comes from those underlying fundamentals. Okay, so any questions on the long run aggregate supply curve? That's where we left off with on Friday. All right, so all of our supply curves, except for the money supply curve since it was determined by the Fed, but it usually has that upward slope to it. So the short run aggregate supply curve has that slope to it also. So for micro class, which was covered in your international chapter, so with micro, if we have the supply of Budweiser and the price of Budweiser, we expect the supply curve to be upward sloping. Now, those of you who had micro, what were some of the things that we held constant to come up with that? In other words, we said, yeah, you know, Budweiser's willing to supply more if a case of Bud is $20, they'll supply 100 units, but if the case of Bud goes up to $24, they're willing to supply 120, right? So that's what that upward sloping relationship, the law of supply, as the market price goes up, Budweiser is willing and able to supply more Budweiser to the market, right? The quantity supplied goes up. Why? What were we holding constant for Bud when we make that claim? Or the other way to think about it is, even if the cases of beer are going up from 20 to 24, what's a situation that would cause them to not want to bump up from 100 to 120? What else could be changing that they would not want to supply more? Production costs, good. So number one, I think, would be production costs. And that's one of, ends up being, not what you need to know for this class because this is macro, but that ends up being one of our supply shifters for micro. So production costs, if those are doubling, then, and prices go from 20 to 24, but production costs double, they're probably going to cut back, right? So if production costs would go up, that would actually cause the supply curve to probably drop back overall. So we'd have kind of a double whammy. If we isolate the price effect all by itself, holding all of the things constant, stuff like what? Stuff like production costs. Well, yeah, then they're going to bump up to 120, right? If production costs went up. All right, so there's some other things, but that's the one I want to hone in on because that's the one that's relevant to macro. So thank you, Andrew, for picking out the one that I wanted to hear. There's some other things we hold constant too, but that's the one that I wanted to look at especially. So note, Bud increases the quantity supplied as long as production costs would be resource costs, right? The price of resources. Resource costs are held constant. So the fancy word we put on that was that ceteris paribus, that Latin word, holding all other things constant. This is the direction we'd expect it to go. Okay, so that relationship then we're going to claim potentially holds at the macro level also. So remember, we've got not only Budweiser, but about millions of other goods included with real GDP, right? Budweiser is just one stinking good out of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries over the course of a year, right? Budweiser is just one of those. So we got chicken wings and other beers and lawyer services and dental services and education and tuition and all the stuff on the shelves at Walmart, all of that stuff, right? So this is just one example of that. So the short-run aggregate supply curve makes the claim that maybe the economy could also have a bump up in production if only output prices went up and resource prices were fixed. So it's possible to move from point A to point B, where we'd be at a higher price level. Let's just say we started at 100 because we can just choose it to be our base here just for fun, just to keep the numbers easy. And now we're looking at the price level climbing to 108. So we had 8% inflation, kind of, because the assumption of the short-run aggregate supply curve is that we had an 8% rise in output prices, but resource prices remain fixed. Okay, so that's our assumption of the model, and then we'll talk more about how realistic that may or may not be here in a moment. But that's what this short-run aggregate supply curve is showing, is a bump up to Y2 in the short run. All right, so let me write some of that out so we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. So the short-run aggregate supply curve, SAS, shows a possible positive relationship. Shows a possible positive relationship between higher price levels and higher real GDP. Given, here's our assumption of the model, here's what we're holding fixed, so always pay attention to that word given. Resources and technology, which is what we had before. So given resources, and let me be more specific there, quantity of resources, quantity of resources, and technology, and resource prices. So we added kind of this extra ringer on. What were my shifters of the long-run aggregate supply curve? Look back in your notes. What were the things that made this thing shift to the right? Change in capital, change in the quantity of capital. Good, what else? Change in natural resources, change in the quantity of natural resources. What else? Change in labor, the quantity of labor, right? So all of that stuff is moving this way. And then last one, changes in technology. And I might have mentioned human capital and some other things there, but so change in technology. is going to move this thing to the right. So for the short run aggregate supply curve, all of those things also shift the short run aggregate supply curve. But our one bringer on the list is resource prices. We're going to hold resource prices constant. So how I'll kind of show that a lot of times will be, suppose that nominal wages were $10 an hour. So the price of labor was $10 an hour. So along this curve, we had prices of output climbing by 8%, but nominal wages staying the same at $10. What's happening to the real wage? What's happening to the real wage if the nominal wage stays at 10, but the prices on the shelves of Walmart climb 8%? This was on your test. It decreases, right? So that's what we saw with purchasing power. So the wage, how much stuff you're going to be able to put in your shopping cart when you go to Walmart with your $10 paycheck is going to be less now because everything on the shelves is 8% higher, but your wage stayed the same. So your real wage fell, but your nominal wage stayed constant. That's what this relationship is showing. Okay, questions on that? All right, so is that a reasonable assumption? So as the economy goes through its ups and downs, you guys can write this. Let's put the business cycles kind of handy to put up here. I'm going to draw it over here. Just you guys can put it over there if you want, or right underneath your notes. So we've got real GDP for the business cycle being measured on the vertical axis. And for the business cycle, what's being measured on the horizontal axis? The business cycle. The one that shows the ups and downs of the economy. Time. So over time, what's happening to real GDP? So over time, we have those ups and downs, the economy going through expansion and recession, right? And if we take a statistical average of these things, we can observe that we seem to have economic growth over time. That's our trend in real GDP. And now we can start to kind of tie that back to this idea of potential GDP. The economy seemed to get beyond itself, kind of overheated, and then it fell. And then it seemed like there was excess. There's a lot of extra people that wanted to work, unemployment was high, and the economy starts to rebound, right? So we seem to almost be circulating, if you will, or oscillating along this where we ought to be in the long term, the potential. So now we can kind of start to think about this line being like potential real GDP. Because otherwise this doesn't quite make sense, right? Because from the production possibilities frontier, I'll just draw a little mini one, could we be at point A when we had beer and pizza? No. We couldn't be beyond our potential, right? So now this is slightly different. It's not the same model. So this was impossible with the production possibilities frontier until there was an increase in resources or technology that shifted it out, right? So the resources and technology business got us a shift out, which then allowed us to be at point A. But otherwise we couldn't get there. Here, we're telling a little bit of different story, is that this is not sustainable in the long run. In the long run, we expect the economy to be here. But it's possible in the short run that people could work some overtime. We start to overuse some of the resources. Maybe they're going to wear out too quickly, but we kind of push ourselves beyond our potential for a period of time. But then that ends up having to come back to equilibrium in the long run. Okay. So questions on that so far? All right. So when the economy starts to go into a recession, let's say, what happens first? When there starts to be a recession, how are sales going at Walmart? Are they fast or slow? They're slow. Okay, so now Walmart starts to see that there's excess inventory, and they're like, how does Walmart usually respond to that when there's excess, or any business? I'm just kind of using Walmart as an example. There's a lot of excess inventory. What do we do first? We run a sale, right? We got to drop the price. Man, we must be too high on price. Let's get rid of this stuff. We got another shipment coming in. And so they start to lower prices and have a sale. So if that happens to be, that particular product's a little bit slow or something's a little bit slow, the idea is next week will be better, right? So we first see prices start to adjust. When do people start to get laid off? What needs to happen for Walmart to kind of really cut back on people? Nobody's buying it for how long? New stock comes in and it sits. And now we call up our supplier and we say, hey, don't bring next week's shipment. I still got the previous 2 weeks ago is on sale still, and I'm not moving the product here, right? So we start to make a call. And so when do people's wages start to get impacted? How long does it take Walmart to start seeing, crap, we got to start maybe laying some people off? So that first time prices go down, I have a sale. Is that 1 month from now? 2 months? 3 months? 6 months? I don't know. It's kind of an open-ended question. Might vary from company to company, right? But the point I want to bring home to you is that prices are much more quick to adjust than wages. On the flip side, imagine that the economy's starting to heat up. Everybody's doing well. You know, what do employers do first? Do they not have that sale and possibly mark up prices? If things are flying off the shelves, what do they do first? Do they reward all their employees with bonuses and pay raises? No. They probably, we got a little bit of room. We were selling this for $5. Let's mark it up to $5.50. 10% increase in price, right? I mean, the business is booming. Things are looking good, right? When do employees start to get a pay raise? A month from now? 2 months from now? 3 months? 6 months? Right? How long does business have to be good for before the employees start to see some of that in terms of pay or bonuses or other things? So there's this lag time of price adjustments that seems pretty reasonable that we're picking up here with this economic model to say that prices of the output are likely to move before prices of the inputs. And so it is possible to maybe move from point A to point B, right? So that's what we're starting to uncover as an issue. And this is probably one of the more contentious and hotly debated issues in economics, the one that I'm just kind of getting you into here on the lag time between resource price adjustments and output price adjustments. So under this, or you can kind of put a little extra note if you want, I'm going to put it right here. So key point, key note. Output prices, let me start that with input prices. Input prices, inputs are resources, right? So input prices, input price adjustment, either up or down, input price adjustment tends to lag behind output price adjustment. What do we mean by lag behind? Output prices change first, input prices change second. So first, input or output prices change, and second, input prices change. How long? I'm just kind of adding on to that. How long? Well, this is our hot topic that we'll talk about the rest of the term now. So, hot topic for economists. There's different theories. Different theories that we'll explore. All right, does anybody have any questions on the short run aggregate supply curve? We got it defined. The next thing I want to do is just make sure you've got those shifters outlined, because it's good to just memorize those shifters. So SAS shifters. Number one, change in the quantity of resources. Number two, change in technology. Number three, a change in resource prices. So this, of course, is change of capital, change of labor, all the same thing. So one and two, these are the same as the long-run aggregate supply curve. So 1 and 2 are the same ones we had before. And this is the new one we added, change in resource prices. So for example, an increase in nominal wages, big W, leads to what do you think? The sucker going this way or this way? If there's an increase in nominal wages, we heading to the left or to the right? Left? How many lefts we got? Show of hands. How many rights we got? Show of hands. Oh, we got more rights than lefts. This is one of those circumstances that shows you the failure of democracy. Because guess who won? The lefts. So an increase in nominal wages, if businesses used to pay $10 an hour, but now they have to pay $15 an hour, are they going to be able to supply more goods and services when wages go up? No, less. So when resource prices increase, businesses are going to have to cut back. All right, so an increase in wages leads to a decrease in short-run aggregate supply curve, a shift to the left. So this is Andrew had to leave, but this is our production costs, right? So it's more costly to do my business, and so I'm not going to be able to supply as much, and that's going to shift to the right. Okay, so couple other little notes on shifts. So notes on shifts for aggregate supply. So for number 1 and 2, your graph is going to do this for you. So let's draw kind of a quick intersection point at 100. So at a price level of 100, just draw 2 curves again. When I say 1 and 2, I mean 1 and 2 over here of the SAS shifters, which also shift the long-run aggregate supply curve. How that shift is going to look, since it shifts both curves at the price level, at 100, there's going to be a new intersection point with the new long run and the new short run. Just like that. So all I did is I shifted it to the right at the price level. So the price level remains fixed and both curves shift when 1 or 2 happens. For number 3, only the short run aggregate supply curve is going to shift. So just kind of starting over, say we're at 100, and number 3 happens with an increase in nominal wages. So maybe they were at, I'll just do the example I just did, they were at 10. Now they're going to shift to the right, and wages went up to $15. Long-run aggregate supply curve doesn't move at all. And this would go up to whatever. Let's just go ahead and put a, it ends up being 50%. So the price level climbs to 150. All right, but the main thing is long-run aggregate supply curve didn't change. It stayed right where it's at. All right, everybody clear on that? Questions? Okay, so our next thing is introducing aggregate demand. So aggregate demand, I'm going to cut through point A here. Aggregate demand is downward sloping. And we'll talk about why in a second. Did everybody get this? Still going, Stephanie, on that? Okay. So aggregate demand, let me go ahead and define it. Aggregate demand. Remember, the word aggregate means kind of the summing of the individual parts. So adding everything else up. Aggregate demand, AD, shows the amount of goods and services desired by society at various price levels. note, this is always a good little test question, homework question. It is downward sloping. It is downward sloping by virtue of two effects. One is the wealth effect, and two is some substitution effects. All right, so how do we move from a point like A to, let's call it B prime, because I don't want to, I'm going to kind of go back to this later, but let's call it B prime instead of B, like two hypothetical spots, like movements along. So if there's a decrease in the price level, people are going to buy more goods. That's kind of all it's saying, right? They're a little bit cheaper. They feel wealthier. So it's also called kind of a purchasing power effect. So people feel wealthier because their dollar commands more goods and services. Their wage, if they're making $10 an hour, commands more goods and services, right? So their purchasing power has gone up. So wealth effect would be an increase or a decrease in the price level leads to an increase in purchasing power. Assuming their wage stays constant. So holding all of the things constant, cheaper prices. And then these substitution effects bring into account a couple things. One is called an intertemporal. Fancy word, intertemporal. Anybody know what that means? Intertemporal. Ends up being intertemporal substitution. So we're talking about temporal. What are we talking about? Temporal. What's that? Ashley, I think you said it. Temporary, no. But because you were so brave, it's worth an extra credit point. Any other answers, guesses for extra credit? Intertemporal. I think you, once I tell you, I think you'll kind of get it. It's not anything too fancy. Anybody else? I got my extra credit point. Want to take a guess? 3 point?
Today.
Today. Ooh, actually, that's closer to the right answer. It's not quite right, but I already said I was going to give you that. Nice job, Cameron. So intertemporal, temporal does, it has to do with time. And when you said temp, I thought you said time. So it's your substitution over time, like timing of your purchases. So if prices are cheaper today, but you think that they're cheaper today, but they're not necessarily going to stick around, you'll start to substitute your purchases over time, right? We talked about gas prices, I think, once. If we expect gas prices to go up next week, we tend to buy more today, right? So if there's inflation in the future, then that'll change our purchases today. So this intertemporal substitution is the timing of purchases. When do we buy the TV or something, especially when we look at durable goods? Durable goods are goods that you expect to last longer than a year. So if they have a lifespan longer than a year, we'll start to time those purchases a little bit differently when we expect there to be inflation or not. If we get into high inflation countries where inflation's going crazy, when do we purchase stuff? Now, or do we wait till later when we have money in our hand? Now. right? So we're concentrating our purchases now. So that is our intertemporal substitution in consumption over time. So substituting consumption over time due to changes in the price level. If prices are higher today, I buy less today, and I'll do it tomorrow. So we're substituting with ourselves across time. Subbing is the word I got. Yeah, substituting. I said substituting, but I put subbing. Subbing consumption over time. The other type of substitution that we have is a foreign purchases effect. So foreign, I know I'm getting kind of low here, but foreign purchases is the other substitution that we do. If there's inflation in the United States, but not in China, where might I start to buy goods? If Chinese inflation has remained constant, but the US is going up, I'm going to start to buy more foreign goods, right? So again, that's going to cause a change in our domestic purchases. So an increase in our price level relative to foreigners would change some of my consumption. Okay, so let me, I'm getting kind of low here. All right, so let me, underneath that bullet, I'm going to squeeze that. Well, wait, I can erase this now, can't I? All right. We'll free up some room. So for under foreign purchases, an increase in the price level with P star, the foreign price level fixed, leads to less domestic goods and more foreign goods. Okay. So that's how we get our downward sloping aggregate demand curve, and now what causes it to move around? So what's going to cause this thing to shift? Well, as a crutch for memorizing the shifters, I want you to recall, so AD shifters, recall our cigarettes that we learned in the initial chapter. So real GDP broke down into those four categories. We can now kind of think about those four categories for groups that demand our goods and services. So we're kind of doing a little substitution. We can now start to think about these things being our aggregate domestic consumption, purchases by businesses, investment of capital, machines, and equipment, government purchases of weapons of mass destruction, net exports, right? So it's just kind of helpful to think about those shifters now as we think about those agents involved through using the expenditure approach. So number one, consumption. And our consumption's going, well, our primary driver of consumption is consumption through a change in fiscal policy taxes. Our tax rate. So if there is a decrease in taxes, what happens to consumption? Increases, right? So if we have more disposable income, income after taxes, so in our grand scheme of things, we had disposable income, a decrease in taxes leads to an increase in disposable income. Y subscript D, income after taxes. If our disposable income goes up, we are going to tend to increase our consumption. We'll also increase our savings by some fraction, but focus here being on spending, and that leads to an increase or decrease of aggregate demand. To this way, Lance? So we got a left in the house. How many people say left? Lance, are you still on left? Okay, Jesse's with you. How many people say left? Michael, you're in the left camp? How many people say right? Ooh, the rights have it. Are we back to democracy working? Dun, 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 dun. I could see myself accidentally throwing this against the screen. That would not be good. Jake's waiting over there. Jake, what were you doing? Are you shift to the left or shift to the right? Let's see. Does that mean? I just want to make sure there's not some weird mirroring effect. Am I going the right way? This way? All right. So Jake says to the right. Right? The rights have it. So we're going to have more consumption. So with lower taxes, we're going to be kind of stimulating the economy. Would probably be the purpose of doing that. And so it would shift to the right. So an increase of aggregate demand, a shift to the right. Okay, number 2 is investment. Just kind of chugging along. Investment, again, is not stocks and bonds in econ class. Investment is purchases of new machines, buildings, tractors, stuff that helps make other stuff, capital. And so our trigger here is going to be profit expectations. So if there's an increase in profit expectations, that would lead to an increase or decrease in aggregate demand. So if all of a sudden businesses were kind of looking favorable to the future, this would probably be what's going on today to some degree. There's a lot of industries that are bullish on a reduction of regulations, for instance, a more business-friendly environment with the Trump regime in. So if profit expectations go up, do they buy more machines or less? More. Increase in aggregate demand or decrease? Increase, right? So an increase in aggregate demand. So an increase in profit expectations leads to an increase in aggregate demand. All right. Let's see, I think I'll try to squeeze this one down here. Number 3, government spending. if the government goes out and increases G, government spending, so they put in a new order for weapons of mass destruction, some new nuclear warheads. Trump has talked about beefing up the military, right? So that's been part of his talk. So if there's an increase in government spending, aggregate demand shift to the right or to the left? To the right, right? So it's just another spending increase. Now, with all of these things, notice if you were kind of looking up here, it starts to make sense, right? Because check it out. If this goes up, this goes up. If this goes up, this goes up. If this down, this goes in aggregate demand, a shift to the right. Okay, last one. Number 4 is net exports. So if there's an increase in foreign income, so this is Chinese real GDP. So if China is growing by 7%, what effect is that going to have on aggregate demand in the United States? It's going to what? Increase. Good. Why? So an increase in foreign income causes what to go up? Exports, right? Where they're going to start buying more American goods too, more chopsticks. We talked about chopsticks being an important export for the United States. So if Chinese incomes go up, that leads to an increase in exports. With our C plus I plus G plus X, remember X is equal to exports minus imports. So if exports go up, that makes aggregate demand go up. So an increase in aggregate demand. What if there is an increase in the foreign price level? So now other countries' price level goes up, the United States stays the same. What's going to be the impact there if the foreign price level goes up? They're going to buy what? Imports go down? For them? For them, which is what for us? So this is the US hat here. So this is the US hat. If the price level in China goes up, Chinese prices are higher, United States level stayed the same, what goes on? I'm agreeing with Ashley, by the way. Chinese imports go, what'd you say? Remember? You said imports, and I think you said imports for them go down. Okay, that's okay. I know. I thought you said the Chinese one, which would actually be more right. Would our imports go down? So, would our imports go down? Chinese goods are more expensive relative to US goods. Would we buy less from them? Yes. Is that the one you were hitting on? Okay. Any other effects? Yeah, the export side works here too. So not only would imports becoming less, so if they're importing less, if there's less over here, does that make this go up or down? The overall expression. If this gets less, So let's start with exports first. So an increase in the foreign price level. Are we going to sell more of our goods to China? Yes, right? So there's an increase in exports. Now, the other effect you said is that there's going to be what with imports? A decrease in imports. So there's a decrease in imports. So do we know for sure what happens to net exports is kind of the thing I wanted to come back to. Because this is net exports. It's going to do what? It's going to go up. For sure? For sure. Imports are smaller. This number is getting smaller, which makes the overall expression get bigger. And then, of course, this one getting bigger makes the overall expression get bigger. So if both of these effects lead to an increase in aggregate demand, we're going to have a shift to the right from this foreign effect here of net exports. Okay. Questions on that? So we've got long-run aggregate supply shifters. We've got short-run aggregate supply shifters. We've got aggregate demand shifters. So now we're ready to see what goes on with this model and see all these different policy changes and start to make predictions about the variables we care about. So remember the three goals were what? Low unemployment, low stable inflation, increasing real GDP. All of those things are going on here. So where we're taking the course now is a little bit of a policy shift to some degree on if lower taxes, what happens? What's our prediction of what will happen? A shift to the right means what's going to happen to prices if Trump lowers taxes, holding all of the things constant. What's our prediction on prices? They're going up, right? So we are going to point B, basically. What's happening to real GDP? It's going up. So let's see. From our three policy goals, low stable inflation, is an increase in prices good or bad? Good if it's expected, right? Is that what you said? Yeah. It depends on, that could be potentially bad if it's not within reason of a reasonable bound. And then, of course, real GDP going up, good or bad? That's good, right? Unemployment going up or down? Yeah. Down, right? Now, if we're starting to force, if the economy is already operating at its potential, then we might be starting to push unemployment almost lower than it would normally go. So now we got some things to start thinking about, this balancing act of where we are and where we're going. All right, so let's do a little example. We're going to start from scratch, new graph, now that we got the basic one down there. All right, fresh board. So, example. Suppose that Trump initiates an increase of 20% on military spending. if the economy is in an initial long-run equilibrium, show the effects of this policy in the short run and long run on the price level and real GDP. Boy, that looks like a great essay question for the final exam. Suppose that Trump initiates an increase of 20% on military spending. If the economy is in an initial long-run equilibrium, show the effects of this policy in the short run and long run on the price level. Okay, so first of all, we need to know what this long-run equilibrium is, and I showed it before. So the long-run equilibrium is where all three curves cross at the same time. So the home base that we want to be able to draw, putting the price level on the vertical axis, real GDP on the horizontal axis, a long-run aggregate supply curve, vertical, where it intersects the horizontal axis shows the potential for the economy. And then a downward sloping aggregate demand curve and an upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve, all intersecting right there. So a long run equilibrium is always where the three lines cross. Now you go, do the rest. Work with your neighbor. You guys can chat with your neighbors. Have fun with it. I'll walk around and look for questions. Start with the short run effect. Start with the short run effect. I'll walk around the room. Do I have the sign-in sheet? You know, I kind of looked for that earlier, but it evaded me. So you guys work on the problem. Let me see what. See if it's in here somewhere. Nope, there it is. Okay, I want to see on everybody's paper that home base. So as I come around, you should have that drawn already. Good, that's good. Now talk about what this military spending thing's going to do. Make sure you mark what's happening on the vertical axis and the horizontal axis too. Yeah, looks good. Yep, you got to start. Mark your axes where your new intersection point is. No, why? That's wrong. But why? Yeah, what were you thinking? I just want to know why. Well, what shifter made this happen?
But I missed part of the
Yeah. So look at your shifters. Which one would that change?
further down.
Yeah. Look at your shifter list. Yeah, you got it. Changes your AD right here. So that's that one. So you just lead with the aggregate. Stand up and. All right, so give me a. I like that you did the little dashes here. Get that sucker around there. Be brave. Okay, good.
Yep. Oh, thanks.
Hey, looks like we got a good start. So what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so this one.
So look at your shifters. So suppose Trump initiates an increase of 20% on military spending. So that's going to cause something to shift. So look at your shifter list. All around, basically, and then make sure you label your axon where that intersection.
That'd be 81.
So you shifted short of right?
Or not, no, 81.
Okay, so that's no. No, you're getting I run on the board, I suggest you all of those shifters are so that's pretty
Oh, it's right.
All right, so it looks like people are on the right track here for the short run. Jake, let me see yours. Hold it up to the camera. You didn't do any shifts. So take your microphone off mute.
I thought the SAS would move to the left.
Okay, why? What shifter did you think would cause the SAS? Because you're not alone. There was other people who there too. So which one of the short run aggregate supply shifters made you think that?
Wouldn't that be the change in the resource price?
In the resource price. Did resource prices go up? Is that what the problem states? No. So which shifter are we talking about? Aggregate demand. So on the aggregate demand, this is military spending would be spending by the government. So an increase in spending by the government causes the aggregate demand curve to shift to the right. So for the short run, we would do a shift to AD2. So one way that we can do this, by the way, is to say this would be government spending at G1 level or G whatever the current level. What caused this to shift is that the government increased spending to G2, 20% higher than where they were before. So you can kind of think about it that way, or we could call this AD2, which most of you probably put down. AD1 is up, so that we can kind of use the notation as little reminders about why things are moving. Okay, so if that's the case, then the economy moves from point A to point B based on what assumption? Now I can almost come back to Jake for that one, because he kind of mentioned this. What would cause the economy to move from point A to point B in the short run? What assumption? how do we get from A to B, the price level rising, real G declining? Yes, that the SAS stayed constant. And what causes it to stay constant? Yeah, you're on your game, man. I like that. All right, so yeah, the resource prices. Yeah, the cost of production, the production costs, right? So another little reminder we can do with this is to say, assuming that nominal resource prices stay fixed, let's just say $10 for fun, it's possible that the economy could surge out to Y2 and prices on the shelves would climb from, just to put some numbers and keep things easy, let's say the old price level was 100 and it climbed up to 104. Just making up some numbers. So now we have a 4% climb in the prices at Walmart, but our pay has not gone up at all. That's what allowed businesses to increase production. Okay, that's the short run. So our short run prediction, if we're going to write that down, so short run effect. Our short run effect is that an increase in G causes an increase in aggregate demand, kind of our first step, number one. Step number two is that there'll be an increase in the price level and an increase in output. Assuming fixed resource prices. I'm just kind of adding that as a little bit bonus. That's always the assumption. As Cameron was saying, as moving along a short-run aggregate supply curve, resource prices are fixed. So we're kind of embodying that in the model. Okay, so that's our short-run effect. That's the prediction. That's half the battle. Because now, what's going to happen in the long run? So in the short run, by the way, the short run equilibrium for the economy is always shown by the intersection of the short run aggregate supply curve and the aggregate demand curve. So let's put that note in here. Note, short run equilibrium is always shown by the intersection of short-run aggregate supply and aggregate demand. So notice that when we had a long-run equilibrium, we also had a short-run equilibrium, right? So the current state of the economy is always shown by the intersection of the short-run and the aggregate demand, short-run aggregate supply and aggregate demand. The fact that that happened to coincide with the long-run aggregate supply made it a long-run equilibrium as well, right? So this is, think of this being the current state of the economy. Where are we today? We're always there. Thinking about that helps us look to where we're going. Where are we going to be in the long run? Good. Price level increases, but real GDP stays the same here or here? At the potential, right. So we got to get back to the long run. So the intersection of the aggregate demand curve and the long run aggregate supply curve shows you where we're headed in the long run. What's going to start to happen to get us there? What's the thing that's been kind of missing that allowed us to get to point B in the short run, but isn't going to last forever? What's going to adjust? Prices of resources, right? So eventually, the economy's heated up, right? Employers are starting to look at their boss and say, I know you're making a ton of money right now, right? The economy's hot. We're selling our product like hotcakes. I've got another job offer, by the way, boss. 2 other job offers. Start doing this. Show me the money. Keep me around, right? So the employees start asking for pay raises. For one thing, just to keep up with inflation, just to keep things fair. If prices at Walmart went up by 4%, what does my wage need to go up by to just stay up with inflation? 4%. Boss, I need a 4% pay raise, right? So now we start to see people getting adjustments to their pay because of that inflation. Well, where are we going to end up? We're going to end up at this point. Let me do a green here. Point C. At point C, the price level is PL3, and let's just say it's, I guess, 108. So after the dust settles, not only labor with wages, but also machine costs, rental prices of machines, commercial space on Main Street, you know, the rents of office space, all kinds of resource prices are going to start to be pushed up due to the economy booming with prices and incomes going up, right? So we're going to start to see resource prices start to catch up to output prices. All right, and so the short-run aggregate supply curve to get back to a long-run equilibrium is going to shift to the left. And what is the new nominal wage? What does it need to be using these numbers I've got here? What does my new pay need to be? It was $10. It needs to be what? A little louder? 18's a little too strong. 14's too strong. I had $10 an hour. Prices on the shelves at Walmart ultimately went up how much? 8%. How much does my pay need to be to keep up with it? $10.80. I need an 80-cent pay raise. Remember, a 10% pay raise would be $1, right? I'd have $11. So an 8% pay raise would be $10.80. And now we have equilibrium restored again with resource prices and output prices. We're back to purchasing power given our long-run equilibrium here at YP. So let's write that out. So the long-run effect, and if you want to put a little extra star, this type of problem would be an awesome problem for your final exam, kind of a short answer problem like this. So the long-run effect, in the long run, we have kind of, what did I have, step 1 and 2 on that last one? All right, so let's call this number 3, because this process now continues into the long run with step number 3, resource prices going up. There'll be an increase in resource prices, leading to a shift to the left of the short-run aggregate supply curve. How far is it going to go? To the new equilibrium point. So new long-run equilibrium at point C. Now, before I dismiss, there's one important thing to look at Trump's policy. How did it work out for us in the long run? Was Trump's policy a good one? Did we have any real benefits? Our real income's the same, right? So we had this short-run boom, but ultimately, after the market adjusted, we came back to right where we were. We just have prices that are 8% higher. We'll pick up there next time. Yeah. Thank you. Good job for you too.
Thank you.
What did you want to say?
My actual grade. I
Oh,
wasn't here for that.
where's that grade sheet? Yeah. Let's see, Lance, where were you on that sheet? There you are. You did pretty good on that test. What do you need here? So, what's your test look like?
So I get opening for
Yeah, and I think you should be able to you did good on this last test. Good job. Yeah, so kind of let's come up with some new strategies, get that thing up a little bit more on that. I also have a freebie. You haven't used your freebie yet. I let people make up one test.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So,
I'm just gonna wait till the end.
yeah, you can wait a little bit longer. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, right. We're not gonna be here Friday, we're going to Wisconsin.
Okay. Out of here. Friday. So Friday, you're going.
Yeah,
All the way to Wisconsin
yeah,
for one game.
yeah, A game.
Oh God. What is that part of your league? Can't be. There's a tournament?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it's not a tournament if you go to one game.
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm playing, but
So that's 9 hours probably.
rough, yeah,
Just for me to get to Minnesota when I'm hauling butt is 8 hours. So
Yeah.
Wisconsin's a little bit.
yeah.
Gonna be terrible.
That's gonna be fun.
All right. See you later.
All right, see how you guys.
Good.